Let's talk about a thing called a podcast. We're going to start really basic on this one. At its most basic form, a podcast starts as a digital file. It's a recording of something that happened. Let's make this a little bit real with an example. Let's say you are a basketball enthusiast and you happen to like the Portland Trail Blazers. Now let's say that every week you get together with a couple of your friends and you all sit around a table and you all talk about the Blazers. Now, this wouldn't be unusual, except that what you have is a microphone in the center and recording equipment that records the conversation. And you guys talk for about an hour. That recording may or may not be of interest to other people. But let's say you guys are fairly entertaining and you think people are going to like it and you want other people to be able to listen to it. Well, you now have a digital file. It's a recording of what you guys talked about for an hour about the Blazers. And now you go, oh, let's see if other people want this. So you put it out onto the internet. And people, if they want to, can go, oh, look at this. You know, on April 12th, they were talking about the Blazers for an hour. This says the subjects they talked about were, you know, their last game and, you know, why they're not called the, you know, jail Blazers anymore. And, well, that sounds pretty cool. I want to listen to that. They can take that file and they can get a copy of it, put it onto their personal computer, or put onto their phone, or put onto their music player. They can get it put onto, typically, any device capable of playing back the recording, that digital file. There's lots of different devices that do that. Now, we're almost ready to explain podcast, but let's take a look at that word pod. We discussed the fact that this digital file could go onto any one of a number of different devices capable of playing back the digital file. You can hear what was said around that table. One of the most popular devices for this purpose in the early to mid 2000s was a device called an iPod. An iPod was a portable music player from Apple and was incredibly popular. Millions and millions were sold. And most commonly, they were being used for playing back music files. If you wanted to get, you know, the latest album from your favorite artist, you could get it as electronic files and it would get stored onto your iPad and then you could hook in your little headphones and you could listen to the music whenever you wanted to. Cool. But then people clued into the fact that it didn't need to be music. It could be four guys sitting around a table in Portland, Oregon who liked the Blazers. And so they started publishing these files on the internet and people increasingly found it awesome and downloaded them onto their iPods, and people were listening to them. There wasn't even really a term for this at first, but the term that eventually rose is called podcasting. And again, the pod comes from the first device that was used very commonly for this. Cast comes from, well, the word broadcast, casting, to spread or scatter. And the principle is this. You take this recording, put it out on the internet, and it just scatters and spreads to whoever wants it, whoever wants to listen to it. Another way to think of this is as on-demand radio. You could have a little bit of a talk show. These four guys are sitting around talking. That's a talk show. Well, you could broadcast it on the radio and people only get to listen to it if they happen to listen to it at the exact time these four guys are sitting around their table talking. Or you can record it, put it on the internet, and then when someone says, I want to listen to a talk show about the Blazers, they listen to it. Radio on demand. And again, there's a lot of ways to think about it, but the term that eventually arose is podcasting. Now this has become quite a big thing. And there are a couple of characteristics of how this works that kind of define a podcast. Let's look at a couple of those. Some characteristics of podcasts. Generally, they are episodic. An episode comes out, another episode comes out a little while later, another episode comes out a little while later. And it can be on whatever schedule the creators of the content want it to be, but you might have one that just comes out weekly. You might have one that comes out every single day. You might have one that just comes out whenever the people that make it want to make another one. It gets published on a random basis. but there's episodes that come out. The other concept that applies most commonly to podcasts, it's not required, is that you can actually subscribe to them. Instead of having to remember, hey, those 4 guys that talked about the Blazers, let me go check and see, do they have any new podcasts? Instead, you can go there once and you can subscribe, and every time a new one comes on, it'll automatically be sent wherever you asked. Your personal computer, it could be sent to your phone, but you get it automatically. And that's another thing that is a characteristic, or can be, of a podcast. You can actually set it to automatic download and just say, hey, whenever a new one comes, just send it to me. Or you can say, you know, scratch that. I am subscribing, but I want to be in control. So can you just notify me? Just send me a text or an email when a new one comes, and then I can decide whether or not I want to download it onto my device. That's another set of characteristics about podcasts. And again, it's not required. In its basic form, a podcast is just a recording you put up on the internet and people can grab it if they want to. But it helps a lot in terms of keeping people's interests, to have regular episodes come out, to have people able to subscribe so that they don't forget about it and they get that continual flow of the content you're creating that they want, and to give them the option to download it automatically if they want to onto whatever device they're going to listen to it on. Let's cover one of the coolest terms I've seen in a long while in the computer industry: podcatchers. Podcatcher is just a type of software. It's just a computer program. Now, it's a computer program that makes listening to podcasts easy. Because here's the thing. I've found that once you start listening to podcasts, you start listening to multiple podcasts, your interests spread, you hear about a new one you want to check out, and eventually you find yourself, wow, I've got 20 subscriptions, 20 different podcasts I'm listening to. Podcatcher software gives you a visual representation of the different podcasts you're subscribed to. If you want to, it can show you all the different episodes that have come out on that podcast. It can show you which ones have I actually downloaded onto my computer. It can show you a lot of different information. But it's software that manages the process of acquiring and listening to podcasts. It's a general category of software. You know, the world of podcasts, or podcasting, is a constantly evolving world. They've only been popular for about 5 to 7 years at the time I'm recording this video. But I want to cover just a few examples of popular podcasts because they kind of speak to how this particular aspect of the internet and the technology world is evolving. And again, this is as of 2017. One of the most popular podcasts, and ones that made waves in the news that caused people that didn't even know what podcasts were to stand up and pay attention, is a podcast called Serial. I think Serial came out about 2015. Serial was kind of unique in that it came out once a week. Remember, podcasts are episodic and they have sometimes a regular publication schedule. This one came out once a week, and it was actually the running record of a journalist's investigation into a crime that had been committed, where she actually suspected the person accused of the crime hadn't actually committed it. And she followed this through over a period of several months, and it became incredibly popular. When a new one was actually published, a new episode, millions of people would log on to the website that hosted that file and download the newest episode of Serial. It made news all over the country. So there's Serial. Just a really fascinating, intriguing story about an investigative journalist checking out what she believed to be a falsely accused person. Another one, This American Life. This American Life is a popular radio show on National Public Radio. They actually take their show, sometimes add a little bit of content to it, turn it into a recording, and actually put it out on the internet as a podcast. And you can listen to that. It's quite popular. Finally, WTF, with a comedian named Mark Maron. This is a comedy podcast. Well, not really comedy all the time. He is a comedian, but he just talks about whatever he wants to talk about, and he's very popular with a lot of people. This is unique in that the President of the United States of America, Barack Obama, was on the podcast with Mark Maron. Actually went to his house in Southern California with Secret Service all over the house, sat down where all the other guests had sat down, and actually did about an hour-and-a-half long podcast interview with Mark Maron, thereby lending a lot of legitimacy to the idea of podcasts as a valid medium where people can get their news, their entertainment, and that sort of thing.